Welcome to the Varsity Locker Room Podcast. Your hosts, Frank Kill and Matt Tabler. We have a special guest today, and again, he always used the friends of the program, the FOP, and our good friend Matt Childers is with us here today. And, you know, obviously through this podcast, we've been trying to seek out special guests and who's worthy enough to be on. And obviously we had to throw in Coach Sagerson first, and you are our second guest. So
honored.
we are glad that you're here with us today.
My privilege. Yeah. Pleasure to be here, boys.
Just a little introduction on Matt. Matt's a graduate of LCC 1985, where he was a standout basketball player. After graduation, he continued his education and basketball career at the Ohio State University Lima campus before graduating from the University of Toledo. Matt was an executive in radio for 2+ decades and was a founder and president of the Childers Media Group. And he started the first FM all-sports station, which everyone knows now, in Northwest Ohio at 93.1 The Fan back in 2009. He has hosted Lima Land Hoops, as well as having a History of Basketball podcast. Matt is currently the VP of Allen Lima Leadership and Lima Chamber of Commerce, and host Hoop Saturday every Saturday morning on WIMA at 8 a.m. It's a great show. I've been on it. I think that was a much needed thing. I don't know, Matt, how that all came, but it was something well needed in this area.
To me, it was just a labor of love. I've loved sports my entire life. When I first was, playing in my backyard, playing basketball, I'd listen to CKLW and WJR, the voice of the Great Lakes. And when I went to the University of Toledo, I fell in love with radio because I'd listen to J.P. McCarthy in the morning. And he was this legendary figure. He could talk to the President of the United States, and then one moment talking to Sparky Anderson, and then next moment talking to Dick Vitale. And I fell in love with radio at that point. And when I took my first job out of college, I worked for Milcor Lima Register, and I had no idea. I thought it was cash registers, but it was HVAC products. And they sent me out to the New York City area, they call it the tri-state area. I lived in Connecticut at the time, and Mike and the Mad Dog, WFAN, had just started in 1988. And I was out there in the early 90s, and it was Mike Francesa and Chris Mad Dog Russo. And I fell in love with sports radio. Tony Kornheiser was on, Mike Lupica, Don Imus in the morning. So I fell in love with radio. And when I moved back to Lima Land, I ran into Tom Francis at the old Murphy's Pub having lunch one day. And he said, "Hey, we're looking for, a sales manager. We're looking for a new sales for, So I ended up, long story short, I ended up working for WIMA Radio, then transitioned over and worked for Maverick Media. And then we bought the radio stations and moved them downtown, and that was the impetus for the fans. So the reason for it, the new iteration is I was just talking to Todd Walker one day, and we talked about would there be a spot, would there be an opportunity, and to have a segment from really December through the Final Four, because it's such a hoops crazy area. I was thinking about it the other day. We have 35 Mr. Basketballs in Ohio, and 20% of them are from the Lima area. Yeah. So Lima has this great tradition, and I love hoops. I did my one show with Matt Metzger, Matt and Matt, for about 12 years, and loved it. And it really, to me, in the deep dark days, Frank calls it the dog days of winter, I like something to do. I like something to research. I like something to keep my mind going, because it's only light for like 10 hours. And so this gives you something to be, relevant about. And we've always had such a great hoops tradition in this area. And this year is like, just like others.
Well, I'm glad you started it back up, because I was kind of missing something that just talked about high school basketball. Mm-hmm. And I remember the last couple years at Elida, I would wake up on Saturday mornings when I was at Perry just to listen to you guys, because you would get a good analysis of the Friday night. And that was always cool. So I was starting to miss it at Elida, but I had an opportunity when you started it back up last year. I just sit in the locker room. I put it on my big speaker. The kids aren't there. You're prepping. And I just listen. And it's refreshing, because you got guys like Bags on there, Ron Williams. These guys are awesome, along with you, and giving an analysis from Friday night.
Yeah, for us, I mean, to me, it's all about, having really good content, having some intelligent talk, but also having some fun along the way, and having some smart people join the program. I always love, Coach Seger. All the money I owe Coach Segerson and Adams for coming on for free over about 2 decades, where they've just provided great content. I always call myself, on the heels of Jimmy Carter's funeral, the president, that I always called myself Jimmy Carter, because they were Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. They didn't like each other. They weren't friendly with each other. They got in fights with each other. And to this day, we break bread a lot together, have some beverages together, and they're now sharing Christmas cards with each other. So I feel good about that.
So is it fair to say you're the bridge between the two?
No doubt. No doubt.
Well, I would like to apologize. I didn't have the cubed ice for you today. I didn't bring Kewpie or McDonald's for you today. So, that's one of the things when I came onto your show, like you always had for me. And I'm like, man, I am a terrible host.
Yeah. Well, that started with, because Vince and Koza and I we love to eat. And we loved, like, our sponsors, whether it was Regali's or whomever it was, and McDonald's, so one of us it was usually me, just to be fair. I was always bringing in food, and then Metzger and I used to get our Shawnee Country Club chef to bring us in food for the Super Bowl. And I remember Denny Thompson was on with us that day, and Doug Davis, and he brought in this enormous spread of, ribeyes and food and Philly cheesesteaks and wings, and it's right up your alley, Frank. But it was always always great. And as I said, my roots go back. I was just a fan of what great broadcasters brought to the game. And when I went over to Maverick Media, my goal was to get Vince to come over and do his Saturday show with us, and then inevitably have him be full time with us. So it worked out really well. And what Mark Bagley says a lot is, he goes, you give coaches and players and fans a platform to be able to really highlight what they're doing and make them feel special. And I think we do a pretty good job of that.
As you said, a platform. And I look back, 15 years ago, when you brought in the high school kind of platform of, we're going to cover high school sports, and obviously 104.9 The Eagle covering all of LCC sports.
Yeah.
And Northwest Ohio, we treat our athletes in this area alone like these high school kids are superstars. And I think as a kid, for 4 years, you get that attention, because after high school, if you're not the Xavier Simpson and moving on to a bigger level, you don't get that attention. And I know a lot of kids really appreciate it. That's why we pick every week 2 players of the weeks, because we want to acknowledge what they're doing for their high school, but also recognizing, like, hey, you are doing great things. And I look back at what you guys did, just by covering high school sports on a daily and talking about it, like, that just brings light to these kids for what they do in such a small period of time.
Yeah. I listen to your podcast every week, and I'm grateful for it, because it gives me the information I need for my show. And I will say that, the more that we get away from the 70s, 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s, the less local there is. When we thought of envisioning what 93.1 The Fan would end up being, was just really a dedication to local sport. We did it because 92 Zoo was a top 40 station, was kind of failing, and the revenue was going down. We weren't seeing as many advertisers on that platform. And so the idea was, hey, let's move our country station over to that station, and then we'll move ESPN radio at the time, 940 AM, over to 93.1. And the reason was that because this is such a sports hungry town, we could go into Ottawa or Ottoville and Fort Jennings, and we could sell a game out in seconds versus what we could sell on 92 Zoo. Yeah. And so that was the reason for it. And that's why we had it. And so that was to give the platform to our folks. And then we also, we did have home of LCC on 104.9. We did that for about a decade. And there was Frank's championship run. Those were gold to us. We had Coach Segerson. I remember his year they were 2-3, and somebody was giving me grief for having LCC have their own station. Well, they never lost another game after they lost to Liberty Benton on December 28th, 2009, win the state championship in 2010. Frank wins it 2 times. So we had all those runs, including volleyball runs to the state, winning championships with the likes of Daniel Tafflinger and JoJo Krieg and those teams. So this is such a sports hungry area that it was not really a long shot to me to to put the station on an FM dial.
Talking about a couple, your station and a couple guys that we've lost too soon. Just what did those guys mean, and Vince Koza and Aaron Matthews, to your radio?
Yeah. So, again, the connection that they had, I mean, especially, in my day when I was growing up, Vince was the king of, he was, the king of media. And what he did on TV was essential to what we have today. I was just talking to Kevin Creamer, who's the president and general manager of WLAO, and he's been there for 40 years at least. And we were talking about it. They almost get in trouble because of the greatness of what they are. If you don't have somebody's running the hurdles out at the Northwest Central Conference Championship, somebody calls and gets mad because they've covered it so well that if you miss one thing, and if you watch that Hoops right out, I'll give you an example. When Frank was just speaking earlier, I just thought about it. I watch TV 13 quite a bit in Toledo because I went to the University of Toledo and just stay a connection there. And Mark Kuntz and others do the sports there, and they do a great job. They get about 3 minutes. Yeah. They get about 3 minutes to do the sports. It's 15 minutes on WLIO on a night, maybe 20 minutes on a Friday night. And they cover so much. And I think what Vince and Aaron Matthews did was just, you need personalities. You need personalities to be able to bring people in. And that's what they were able to do. And we had great one. We had Mike Shep doing 104.9 basketball, LCC basketball before Aaron, and Adam Stolley did the games. Billy Tafflinger and Mike Shep did the games, both football and then basketball games. Kevin Creamer and Mike Shep. I think you need some credibility there. That's what they brought us. And then Vince, unlike what we do on Saturday mornings now, Tabes, that, I'll have one or two coaches on. Vince would have 10 coaches on in a lightning round. And so, that only he could do that. That was special.
So just last probably media question. What was the big motivation behind selling? Were you burn up with it, or? No,
for me, I'd been in it, for just over 20 years. And, the opportunity, I had some investors that said, if you ever get an opportunity to sell, take that opportunity. And so we did that. And the opportunity there was, I was just grateful to have that opportunity for 20 years. It was something, as I said, when I first started, I'm just driving around as a salesman. I have no idea what I'm doing as a salesman out in New England. And I'm listening. My favorite day was just listening to talk radio. And then I would go to these customers and I started to learn the business. And then they promoted me to Dallas. The next step was Dallas. And I covered the West Coast. But at the time, Dallas was winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. And so they started FM radio with the Ticket and KLIF. And so I just became a huge fan of radio. And to be able to do it for 21 years. And then, the pandemic hit. So I'm incredibly grateful that I was out of it during that time. I mean, all good things to all my media brethren, but it's really been hard since then because, if you think about it, what was closed down? All the restaurants, all the shops, all of that. And, a lot of those folks never recovered. And, we relied on them for our fuel, which was advertising revenue.
Yeah. Well, you're listening to the Varsity Locker Room Podcast with Frank Kill and Matt Taylor and our special guest, Matt Childers. Chili, over the years, obviously, you being in the media, and I think about this, how things have evolved. Tell us, what are your biggest changes that you've seen, that someone's been around? I mean, I know you were gone for a period of time, as you just talked about, the 90s. The 90s. And, coming back to where we're at now versus when you came back. I mean, what are some of the things that have really kind of, brought attention to the game of basketball and maybe concerns or even highlights of why basketball it's a special sport, obviously, to us. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, I always go back. I'm such a nostalgia freak. The word nostalgia is in Greek. It comes from pain. It's like hurt, but it's a good pain. And it always feels good to go backwards. But, Tom Francis, who recruited me to WIMA, Mike Mullen was, really the dean of sports, when I was growing up in Lima Land. And so today as we're taping, you would get on a game, and WDOH would do a game, and they do the JV game at the Vatican. And that was like the biggest deal. I mean, I couldn't believe I was playing my sophomore year. We played at Delphus, and I was, we were on the radio and people heard that, and it was such a big thing. And then when like Mike Shep would have the Casano's Big Cheese Pizza Player of the Game on what they had before it was WOSN, and then Mike Mullen and John Barton were incredible broadcasters, and they brought some. You were just aware of it. It was special. And then today, it's unbelievable. I just said it about WLAO, what they do to cover sports, and especially basketball and football in our area. And they don't only do it for Allen County. I mean, it's like 10 counties, when Marion Local goes to football state championships. And then WOSN and what WTLW, what they've done. I mean, it blows out of the water like that. We were on a little JV game at WDOH back in the day. What people are doing today, it's just normal that who else in the country goes to a ball game, gets a pizza, goes home, and watches the game over they were just at. Right. And yet there's tons of people that do that. And so all of the media, when you're at the Elida Fieldhouse and Dave May and Dave Evans and Chris Adams, and when they would have the banquet at Milano, and everybody would stand up and say, guys, you have to realize how lucky you are, because as we talked about, Toledo gets 3 minutes of sports, and they're getting their whole game on TV, interviews, and now with podcasts and with social media. It's a special area. I mean, I thought when I retired, I actually stayed a few more years at 93 on the Fan after we sold the radio stations. And I retired, and I just wanted to do that on my own terms, and just said, it's been a good run. I missed it come basketball season. Yeah. And so I missed it because there's so much going on. And I think we've had these incredible players. I mean, when you think about all the Mr. Basketballs of Greg Simpson and Aaron Hutchins and Jamar Butler and Xavier Simpson and who am I missing?
Colin White.
Almost George Mangus. I mean, if it wasn't for Malachi Branham, he probably would have been the seventh or the sixth at the time. So anyway, that's what I think is special. Is there's so many great players. There's so many again like the radio personalities. So many great coaches like yourselves, personalities. I don't know. I'm a little biased, but when we would have football coaches on, it was never Jerry Cooper is really good. Mike Fell was really good, but on the radio. But when mostly, but there's a lot of basketball coaches that have some personality and are willing to engage. So that's what I think special.
Well, speaking of the past, I had opportunity because my sister was a cheerleader your senior year to catch a lot of great games. And I still remember the big regional win over number 2, then ranked number 2 OG in a district final, and you're one of the leaders of that team that brings them to the regional. And we had Bob Segerson on last week. Tell us your best Seg story.
There's probably a few of them, but
well, one of my favorite stories was at 19. I'd already graduated, and I came back quite a bit. University of Toledo with that good team, the '89 team, Volbert, Mary, and DeCurtins. They were exceptional. It was his first team he took to state. And Eric Volbert got hurt in the preseason, unfortunately, and so he was out for some games. So he was kind of part of the coaching staff, and I'd hang around Jimmy Carter and Rick Stolley and Ron Williams, and then Volbert was with us. And Seg, at the end of the practice, it was at Lima Senior, and they were going to play St. Mary's, and there was a kid named Dietz who played for St. Mary's, and he was a good player. And Seg gets in front of the team after the game, and he knows that the LCC is really good, and St. Mary's is not very good. And so he, in famous Seg fashion, he says, I will tell you one thing right now. There's one kid I would take in the WBL over any other kid, and that's Dietz. And Volbert, Williams, and Stolley and myself start laughing. I don't think Jimmy Carter was laughing just because out of respect. And Seg afterwards goes, Volbert's been in the program way too long.
He's starting to understand him.
But that was Seg. We would play a 1-in-17 Bath team, and he'd tell you, he's Lou Holtz. He would tell you, and it's a great coaching strategy. But for me over the years, it always comes down to driving. Seg driving, and going to Napoleon for a scrimmage one time. We almost ran off the road, but he was going so fast, and somebody came over a little bit, and he ends up going off the road. But he was an incredible leader. I was kind of in the forefront. I think we had the 100th win was against St. Mary's my senior year. And so I was in his early tenure. But I lived down the street from him, and I would just go get the key from him all the time. He gave me the key. And my senior year, I was the speaking captain for the year. And in that game against Ottawa Glandorf, Steve Mulcahy, who was our point guard, drove in. At the time, there was a player control foul, and a guy by the name of Sean Ballball, who's a backup for OG, took a charge. Bucket goes in. They wave the basket off. They go the other way. Well, Sean Ballball doesn't go to the line. Terry Mormon, their all-state player, goes to the line. And I noticed that a couple kids on our team had, tipped me off and said, hey, it wasn't Mormon who took the charge. So I'm standing in front of Mormon, like not letting him shoot and telling the referee that he did not take the charge, and Mormon's getting upset at me, and everything shuts down for a little bit. It's at Ohio Northern. It's sold out. The place is going crazy. And they end up letting him shoot the 2 free throws. And it was just kind of momentum for us. We were down at the time, and it just kind of threw us forward. And we ended up winning that game. And a week later in the Putnam County Sentinel, there was kind of a eulogy about OG because they were number 2 in the state. And they basically didn't say anything about LCC until the last couple paragraphs. And Mark Walsh, had led us in scoring with like 16 points. And it said in the article, it said Matt Childers, who will be remembered more for his mouth than his playing ability, finished with 12 points. And that was because of all of that back and forth. But I said that I went to Ottawa, within the last decade, and Dean Myers, the mayor there, and he invited me over to speak at the Rotary Club. And so I read that story and I said, but the good news is I ended up in radio. So I was better with my mouth than I was with my playing ability. So that's what I remember about Coach Segerson. And those 3 great years, Billy Tafflinger led teams that went to the regionals, Bruce Hodges, 3 straight years. That really launched LCC to where 89 they got down there, and then in those subsequent years getting to the state finals and then winning state finals. I think those 3 years were really critical in the history of Bob Segerson's tenure.
Well, you talk about Segs driving, and it was a Napoleon trip with us as well. My senior year, we get beat in the district, and it's a humongous snowstorm. And at that time, we didn't take buses at LCC. We would take the vans when it became tournament time. And he is driving like so fast through the snow, and one of my teammates looks at me and goes, "We probably should have won tonight." He doesn't seem too happy.
Well, good thing those vans had governors on it where they could only go about 64. So Seg always found a way to drive kind of erratic anyways. But, thinking about Seg and obviously the impact that he had on you, and, and I think the impact, Matt, that you've had on a lot of people in terms of, giving us the opportunity to be in this radio gig, tell us that feeling of like knowing that you kind of planted the seed. And when I say planted the seed and what it's been today, you talked about how the coverage of WSN, WTLW, I even think like in today's world of all the social media that's out there, because people it's not that people want to like be like us or be like you. I just think what you did 15 years ago, 16 years ago, and how it's blossomed, the impact that high school sports has, throughout the years, you got to take a little bit of credit of that. And I know you're a humble person, because you are who you are, but you were raised in a good home, but you did something that really no one really did before.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I feel like my family, my mother's side, my name's Matthew Durbin Childers, my middle name. She thought, unlike, she thought I was going to be something like John Fitzgerald Kennedy or Richard Milhouse Nixon or Lyndon Baines Johnson. Anyway, that didn't happen, but her family's motto was always others. And I watched her, she would be a lay communion distributor on Sundays and pull me by my ear into these people's houses who were disadvantaged. And, I always watched that. I had great parents, and I always thought of others, and I love being around others. I love, helping others. And, I was always, I always admired the Tom Francises of the world, who was this great radio icon back in the day, and J.P. McCarthy, Mike Mullen, and then, in my era, with Vince Koza doing what he did. I always just wanted to, Jim Lachey always I can't steal it from him. It's his phrase. It's pay it forward. I always enjoy that. I thought Lima Central Catholic was a lot about that, was about paying it forward. I was able to, my senior year, he called me his caddy. I was Father Hur's caddy during the football season. I took him, he was retired. I took him to all the football games in his car. We'd be driving to like Bluffton for a football game, and I'd be in confession and telling him stuff. He was like, well, what else? What else? And so, I mean, at the end of the day, I just always think about others. I love really quality sports talk. I always have. I love quality news talk, but I like the Charlie Roses of the year, Larry King, who would do great interviews. I always liked Larry King. He would just ask one-word questions. Why broadcasting for you? Why being a publisher for you in some cases? Why being an actor, et cetera? So to me, it was all about others.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because my next question to you is others. When you played, there were 3 divisions.
Yeah.
Now we have 7.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously it's going to give others opportunities to
Yeah.
hoist a trophy at the end of the year,
Yeah.
give them the opportunity to go on a state run, because before, for the last so many years, it's been 4 divisions. Now it's 7.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm confused a little bit. I'm confused by it just because I don't understand it as well. It was easy with 4. That was 12 games, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday was always what I liked. But I would say this, that on the other side of that, I do think that a guy like Kevin Sensabaugh, who had a painful loss last year in the district, and Alex Wagner hits that shot in the corner for OG, and they go on to the state tournament. I think Spencerville would have gone on to the state tournament. A guy like him's looking at that, even though Division 6 looks really difficult this year, he's looking at it going, man, this may be an opportunity for us. Probably same with Delphos St. John's, although they won it in 83 and they won it in the early 2000s, 1999, 2000 with Brett Norris. I like the camaraderie of the state tournament when it's the weekend at the state tournament where you have those 12 games. I really like that. And so I think that experience, so when Tabes went down in 2017 with Perry and Delphos St. John's went down there, they got the full experience, even though they lost in the semifinal. You still get to stay there. You get to stay overnight, and you get to experience the state tournament. I'm sure with your crews, you love that, being able to experience all that. That I don't think will be the same going forward. So we'll have to see how it plays itself out. I don't think it's going to go backwards once it's gone this way. And so that to me will be interesting to see how that plays itself out.
Well, we had talked about that. When you talk about the 2017 year with Perry and St. John's, we would have never got to experience the shot, because we would have been playing our state semifinal at a local high school. And so our kids would have never got that experience that they'll never lose. So you're giving others a chance, but at the same time, you're kind of limiting those chances by only playing the state championships at Dayton with 7 divisions.
That's a great point. To me, that's it right there. So even if you go to Kettering, which is, a fun facility, or the University of Toledo or Bowling Green, it's not the state championship game on that floor.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it takes a lot away from that weekend. Michigan has done this for a long time, and they only play the finals in the Breslin Center. And my buddy who played up in Michigan, and his kids went to school up in Chelsea, suburb, they didn't have the same experience. That's why he would always bring his kids to Columbus for the weekend, because it was a whole weekend, and it was a father-son thing. I remember going with my dad to the state, getting a hotel. He would take me to all the places that they would eat back in the 60s and 70s when they would go, and he'd tell me great stories of seeing great players in the state tournament that were professionals. And I think it's just going to lose a lot of luster.
It certainly can. When they say, oh, it's just extra money for the OHSAA, I don't even know how that works.
No,
I'm not even sure how that works. But I will say this: if you follow Kurt Stubbs on social media, he keeps posting all these games that are historic games. But there's like 13,000 people at the game, and there's 14,000. And with LeBron, I think it was closer to 18,000. I mean, obviously those are kind of an anomaly with the LeBron, but those state tournament games were pretty sold out at St. John Arena when it was, back in the 80s and 90s, as I recall. And so I don't know how much this more is going to be a money grab when there's only a certain amount of teams going down there.
And you think about these changes. I mean, did people? I would love to know, were they taken back when they went from 2 divisions to 3 divisions, and then they went from 3 divisions to 4 divisions?
Yeah,
and now they're going 4 to 7. It would be kind of interesting. Like, it's just like them moving the state tournament from everyone was up in arms. You're not going to play it at St. John Arena anymore. And then people just get used to it. And I think that's probably what's going to happen again. But I would love to go back in time to see what people's reactions were when they were expanding those divisions.
Yeah, no, I guarantee. I actually think they would like Adelphia St. John's would like that it went from 1-2 to 3, because, man, as your school is not as big as Canton McKinley or as one of the Columbus schools, you really did have a chance. To me, that, like John Ellis, my buddy Jay Ellis, played at Walpock, head coach John Ellis at Bath and Walpock. They were undefeated. They had Jim Andrews. They had, they were undefeated in 1969, 1970, that era. And they lost their first game to Lima Senior in the tournament, and it was over. Yeah. So they, it wasn't like they're playing, a Division II school that was maybe 3-17. They played Lima Senior in their first game, and got beat. So I think some would like it better that way. I think the test will be how many people are going to these games, and of course with TV involved, you can actually watch them now. So that discounts it a little bit, but in terms of the attendance. But I don't know. I loved Columbus, and I loved even the Schottenstein Center. I just love that whole experience. I like Dayton. It's a better facility for it. I just think the outsides of everything are better in Columbus.
Yeah, the entertainment around it. Because I just remember, again, growing up, it was, you had the varsity.
The Varsity Club.
The Varsity Club. You also had the Holiday Inn across the road. You get the fish sandwiches on the Friday, and even a skating rink that was next door of St. John's, and I loved it as a little kid growing up. That's just what I really embodied. And obviously, I didn't get to coach at St. John's Arena, but as a player,
you got to play there.
Very epic. It was just one of those arenas that, as a kid, oh my God, I can't wait to go to St. John's Arena. And then it was the shot. But then now it's just Dayton, the road to Dayton, which is still cool. I never got to experience it as a head coach, but obviously with 7 divisions, you've just expanded it. Is it going to be watered down? No, but there's just going to be 7 different state champions. And that, to me, that's the other part. You talked about doing things for others. Well, when are we going to stop expanding it and make it competitive?
I would agree with you. I do think that and the other thing, Dayton does a great job. Their infrastructure there, they know how to run a tournament, and they just run the NCAA tournament days beforehand. They do a great job of that. I'm just a proponent of Columbus and the centralness of Columbus, and then also the amenities all around. It's that's a special place. Meaning whether it's St. John Arena or the Schottenstein Center, it was always that to me was getting to state.
Yeah.
Well, we'll leave it there. We'll get into the state. But again, you're listening to the Varsity Locker Room Podcast. We want to thank Matt Childers as our special guest today. Tune in every Wednesday on Spotify or YouTube to get a breakdown of high school hoops with Frank Hill and Matt Tabler.